Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Two Way Tonight. We end the week together with a lot of uncertainty on Iran and some certainty. What's uncertain? Well, the president's still giving a speech tonight, and we'll see what he says. Are there peace talks going on or not? There's some talk that there is. Are the Israelis really hitting Iranian energy sites, which the Iranians say they are, would be problematic in some ways? And What's the president's intention regarding ground troops? A lot of uncertainty on those things. What do we know? We know that the president continues to say Iran wants a deal. We know that the markets took another drubbing today, and that the level of uncertainty is apparently too much for them, despite the president yesterday saying that he wasn't going to do anything drastic for 10 days and that there could be peace talks before then. And We don't really know what's going on with the Strait either. We'll talk about all that. We'll also talk about the vice president and fraud efforts. We'll talk about Cuba and what Marco Rubio had to say about that, and look at a poly market on that. And There's some other things going on. JD Vance both had a public event today and did an interview. Talk about that. And Rand Paul says he might run for president. I have to say I've interviewed him a couple times lately, and I'd never thought of asking him that. I kick myself because I'm sure he would have spilled the whole thing. Anyway, all that and more, as they say in the television business, coming up on a what they say action-packed, very full episode. All our episodes are full, and two great guests, neither of whom have been here before. Very excited to have them here, and of course your participation. If you're here in the two-way platform and you want to get in on the conversation, please raise your hand. If you're watching on X or on YouTube, please no smack in the chat. Peace, love, and understanding. And I'll remind everybody that if you hear something on the program you disagree with, please don't send me an email saying I'll never watch the show again because someone disagreed with me. Rather, if you do feel like reaching out, say thank you so much for exposing me to an idea, point of view held by tens of millions of Americans that I might not otherwise hear. We'll have a nice civil conversation today. Doesn't mean it'll be boring. It'll definitely be funny, because this is a comedy show. And hopefully the opinions of both of our guests and of the community members who raise their hands will range across the spectrum. This is not a show just for centrist moderates and independents, although they're welcome here. I want Bernie Sanders on every much as I want Laura Loomer on, and you all should welcome that. And if you don't, if you're only interested in hearing ideas and points of view you agree with, I can make a lot of recommendations of programs you can watch, but this would not be one of them, at least not ideally. All right, a bunch of news clips to run through with you. Our guests in a moment, as I said, and I'll remind everybody again, if you've never raised your hand, tonight could be the night you become part of the program. Please consider joining in. Let's do a quick word from a sponsor, and then bring the guests in and proceed largely along a normal fashion. For those of you who are regulars here, you'll find the cadence familiar. Cozy Earth, one of our sponsors tonight. Very much appreciate their support for the program, and very much appreciate you all considering purchasing something from Cozy Earth. I keep saying, just buy one thing. Just go on the website, buy one thing with our 20% discount using the promo code two-way, and chances are you'll be hooked. Now, maybe you don't want to be hooked because you don't feel you have lots to buy, but everybody needs to freshen up towels, sheets, shirts, t-shirts, and of course the pants. And of course, you've never owned a bubble cuddle blanket before, so you don't really know what it means to own a bubble cuddle blanket for yourself or one of your pets. Particularly dogs seem to love the bubble cuddle blanket. Everyday comfort comes from Cozy Earth. It can start with the socks. Very affordable. Buy a few pairs of socks and see if you like them. They come in 4 versatile styles: calf, quarter, ankle, and no-show. Go right now to CozyEarth.com, buy yourself some socks, and see if you like the brand, because you will. CozyEarth.com, promo code two-way for 20% off everything on the site. Thank you for your attention to that matter. All right, ladies and gentlemen, joining us now, Robbie Starbuck. Robbie Starbuck is just is an iconic figure, a legendary figure, a really compelling figure, and I'm really honored to have him here. Welcome, sir. Thank you for being part of Two Way tonight.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I'm happy to be here, and I like that you do have a show that accesses every side of the political spectrum and everything in between. I think it's interesting.
Yeah, very grateful to you. And some of the people who are members of our community are saying, wow, Robbie Starbuck. I can't believe Robbie Starbuck's on. That's great. And some people are saying, and I know you know this and don't take offense, who's Robbie Starbuck? So let's cater to
Well,
the
no,
second.
and wait, you
Yeah.
missed a group. There's also probably a group that says, why does he have this fascist on right
Yeah,
now?
good
So
point. Good point.
you
There,
got a
there,
couple.
there, there are probably some people saying that, but I'm just saying there are people have heard of you and people have heard it haven't, regardless. But you're right, that would be a a subgroup of Group One, or a part of Group One. So just tell people when people see you, you're a very prominent voice in the National Town Square. You've accomplished a lot at a relatively young age. How did you get to be Robbie Starbuck? What's the trajectory of what you've done that has allowed you to be such a prominent voice?
Yeah, I'll try to boil everything into quick things. So, my family originally came from Cuba. My mom, my grandparents, my great grandparents, and the experiences they had, everything being ripped from them that they ever worked for by communism, it really is sort of the DNA that runs through me, and the awareness of how quickly a country can change and everything can kind of be ripped out under your feet. And so, from a young age, though, I was very interested in the arts. So I became a director, and it's a very difficult thing to do if you don't have a Hollywood family and you don't have money, which I had neither. And so I said, you know what, let's try to do one of the hardest things. And it worked. And I directed Oscar winning actors, actresses, some of the biggest music stars. And then around 2015, it was really a little bit earlier than that. I started to see signs that seemed very dangerous to me. The Democratic Party was changing in very serious ways to adopt some very far left stances that concerned me, because the language mirrored a lot of the language of Fidel Castro back in the day. In fact, people who weren't around then or maybe are unaware of it, because it's kind of, this tiny island 90 miles off the US, there was a lot of these propaganda flyers passed around Florida around the time that Castro's, so-called revolution was taking place. And they used, in Spanish terminology, what translates to things like free healthcare, racial justice, things that really started to become the siren song of the Democratic Party around that time. And so I saw all my friends and, some actors that I had directed and everything coming out and supporting the Democrat candidates. And I said, well, why can't I come out and support President Trump? So I did. And I knew what was going to come with that. And, it inevitably did. I wasn't just a director. I owned a big production company at the time that did business with some of the big movie studios like Paramount Pictures. And so at the time that I do this, everybody's calling me all freaked out, because this production company is pretty big. We've got, a bunch of directors all over the world, and everybody's like, Robbie, you could take it back. It's not too late. And I was like, if you don't think, I mean, you guys know me. If you don't think I knew what I was doing, doing this, then you're crazy. But my thought was, I've been very lucky in life. God has blessed me. And if this all burns down tomorrow, that's fine with me, if we make it easier for people in the future to be honest about their opinions and their feelings. So I started there, and then I engaged, in a level of investing that I was very successful at. And so I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put money into everything I believe in and that I'm passionate about. And that's going to be my life's work. And that's what I've done since then. And I think we've done a great deal in terms of eliminating transgender surgeries for children and eliminating DEI in corporate America, which has been, I think, recently the thing that most people have talked about associated to me. Is I have directly been responsible for eliminating those policies, what I would call woke policies, at the biggest companies in the world.
Honestly, I got about 1,000 questions that I'd want to ask you, but we got to get to the news. But let me just ask you a few, and thank you for all that. And really incredible overview. Did you have a Hollywood agent when you were a director?
I did. I did have an agent. Yep, the whole
At
deal.
like CAA or WME or a big
Paradigm
place?
at
Paradigm.
Paradigm, and
And
I had an outside agent too that
yeah.
was the secondary one.
And
Yeah.
did they fire you?
Well, actually, it's sort of interesting. I fired them.
Yeah.
I fired them because at the time, and this was probably a month before I did this, I fired them because I started to understand where things were going to go. And I was like, I better just make things real easy and cut to the
Got
chase.
it.
But all of our directors had their own agents too.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
tried to do things as cleanly as I could for everybody.
And you mentioned the thing that is, I agree with you, that you're maybe most known for, which is putting pressure on these woke companies who operate like their Berkeley or the Nation magazine, and not necessarily in the best interest of their shareholders or half their customers who don't agree. And I have a million questions I want you to ask about that, but we'll save that for another day. Is that what you spend most of your time on now? Those projects, or how would you describe your current oeuvre?
Yeah, I mean, I put things in different buckets. I'm obviously a father. I have 4 kids, and my wife's my best friend. So I spent the majority of my time being a dad.
What's the
and
age range of your kids?
From 17 years old down to 18 months. So we run the gamut, right? My wife and I got married very young. I married her when I was 18. So we're one of those success stories of people who got married young and stayed together. And so that's the majority of my time. And my wife works with me with pretty much everything I do. But our team is very focused on changing legislation in a number of different states. Like recently, one of our initiatives was death penalty for pedophiles. We got that passed here in Tennessee, and it has been passed now in other states as well, and it will continue, I think, along those lines. I pick out, key issues that I want us to move the needle on. Some I'm not quite ready to talk about yet, but we've been gearing up for that are things we do heavy research on, and we prepare, for sort of an onslaught, like the DEI mission. The preparation that went into that is kind of insane, but I'm a very detail oriented person and I think big picture. So, I talked about this recently actually with Ro Khanna because I did an interview of him, which your audience will appreciate. I try to talk to people on the other side of this that don't agree with me. And, I was saying that one of the things I teach my kids is think about everything you do in terms of what are the short-term consequences of it, but you need to also kind of go out 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20, because like say with the DEI project, the momentum was on our side to where the impulse for me could be, hey, let's move the needle all the way to my political beliefs. Let's make them start donating to the things that I care about. And we could have done that and we would have gotten away with it 1,000%. But when I look at that trajectory over time of healthy things for the country, I knew that was the wrong thing 10, 20 years out. If I truly want my kids to live in a country better than the one that I was born into, then what I need to do is think about what would provide stability. And that's why I pitched corporate America on corporate neutrality, so that they just get out of divisive issues and can serve all of us.
Yeah, and many of them have, and many of them directly under your, I'd say, pressure. But many have done it, I think, aware of the new paradigm that you've shaped as much as anybody else. I'd love to interview you for 4 hours because I'm so interested in this. Last question for you, then we'll bring our other guests and then we'll get to the news. Is there anybody who's ever written a profile of you? Is there a profile written of you that you say, yeah, that's good, that captures me, if people want to understand what I'm like? Has anybody written that piece yet?
I mean, they all have their own angle, right? I thought one was funny was a New York Times one they did on me where they said that I was the most feared man in corporate America. I was like, well, then there must not be that many scary figures, right?
Yeah.
But I'll let them ride with that, right? Because it helps me for my purposes.
Right. But has anybody written a profile of you that you'd say, yeah, if you want to understand me, if you want to understand my history?
I don't think so. I don't think so. No, right. They all have their own angle to them.
Yeah.
Like Wall Street Journal did one that was kind of fair, but it doesn't capture, the whole thing. So no, I would say no.
All right. I'm going to do that just so you know. We'll get to that. All right. Our other guest tonight, Dante Mills. I was enjoying the conversation with Robbie, but I'll confess I was feeling a little bit while Dante got on with us. Dante, welcome and thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Do you guys know each other?
I don't believe so.
All right. Dante, how did you get to be a voice on the National Town Square? Just tell us about your trajectory as you grew up to where you are now. What are the signal moments that allowed you to be a voice on the National Town Square?
Yeah, so I grew up in Philadelphia, North Philadelphia. Hunting Park was my neighborhood. And I think what kind of pushed me here was my parents always just believe in exposure, whatever they could possibly do to put me in front of different people, different places. I think the biggest, probably most pivotal thing that happened to me when I was younger is I was in school and we were actually cutting class and almost got caught. So we ran into the assembly room and they were doing an assembly on being an exchange student. And I sat down there because we had to act like we were part of that assembly and I was interested. And I went home. I said, Mom, Dad, do you think I can do this? They said, we'll figure out a way. And I decided I wanted to go somewhere that I wouldn't go when I believed I knew at some point I would start to travel. I said, I don't want to go somewhere that I'll travel to, the regular places like a France or Italy or something like that. So I went and lived in Finland for months. And it just exposed me to just different people, different perspectives. It allowed me and helped me to kind of be empathetic to different situations. Even when I came back home, just understanding that people, based on their scenarios, are put in different situations and have to make the most of it. And you have to learn to live with people, how to navigate different scenarios depending on where you are. So that kind of really, it was pivotal for me and just opened up my mind. I then went on to school, came back to Philadelphia to go to law school and was recruited to a firm in New York. I worked there and at some point opened my own practice and started kind of just being out and about and getting high profile cases. And my first, I guess, foray into news and being on that stage was some of my own cases that were high profile. I would get a verdict or something would happen and I would have to talk about or wanted to talk about what happened to my client. And then when you're out there, they say, well, we understand what happened to your client, but can you explain this to us? A different situation. And I realized that there was a space there for people who saw things, they were experiencing things happening, especially with the law, but didn't truly understand how it impacted them, how it could benefit them, certain things in the law, things that they had to avoid or should avoid with the law. And I saw an avenue there for me to just explain those situations to people because I could talk about it from different angles, different experiences that I've had, and just my legal acumen, my knowledge of the law, pairing that and saying, all right, here's how you break that down, but here's how it impacts your daily life, or it could impact your daily life in which you're experiencing. So I saw a need there, and hopefully I'm doing my part to fill that need and allowing people to be able to use the law for their benefit, to understand the law and how it can impact their daily life so that they make either better decisions or take advantage of things that's available for them that they weren't taking advantage of before. I think there's a lot. I love this country. I think it provides a lot of opportunity for people, but not everybody knows it. They don't know how to reach it, how to grab it, how to make it work for them. And I think that there's a gap there that we can all help bridge by just exposing them to different things, how I was exposed early on. And that really led me here. So now my practice is primarily personal injury cases, civil rights cases, but I represent a lot of high profile people as their personal attorney, actors, singers, musicians, athletes. And it just puts me in a lot of different spaces where I can learn a lot and then turn that around and share it with other people how they can better protect themselves or better take advantage of things that are available to them.
Thank you for that. I want to ask you about 100 questions too, but we're going to move on to the news. But I'm very grateful to you both for sharing your backgrounds and for being here. And let me tell you some things. Tiger Woods has been arrested for DWI accusation after a crash in Florida and property damage involved as well. His car rolled over. And we'll continue to track that. The president may start speaking in Miami this hour, and if he does, we'll probably dip into that. He talked a moment ago on the tarmac on arrival in Miami about a number of topics, including about the war, and that's the latest we've heard from him on that. So let's listen to that. This is President Trump a few minutes ago on the tarmac in Miami. 4B, please.
The country sent them out. When they saw open borders, every country throughout the world, they sent them into a country. And we don't want that. And that's what it's all about. Thank you.
Iran, sir. Iran. What's the latest with Iran, sir?
On Iran, they are being decimated. They are talking. We are talking now. They want to make a deal. Very simply, our military is the greatest in the world by far. Iran is being decimated. Thank you.
Robbie, how's the U.S.-Israeli mission going so far from your point of view? What's encouraging to you? What are you concerned about?
Well, I feel like the two loudest camps are the camp that is extremely pro-war, and then the side that's saying we should never intervene anywhere. And so I kind of piss off both sides because mine is very nuanced. I've seen too many people that I know affected by previous Middle Eastern wars, and my general feeling is our treasure as a country is our young men and women who are supposed to take this over. And I am very reticent to put boots on the ground. I am not opposed to going and doing targeted strikes and taking out evil people. I think that that's necessary. And at times, the thing is, there's always going to be a top dog in the world. And if you're going to be a global superpower, you need to assume position on that, right? So you've got to be willing to intervene in certain cases to set sort of lines about moral authority. The problem with that becomes, for the people who want us to be completely isolationist, if you're going to do that, you need to pick somebody who's going to be the new top dog. Who's it going to be? You know, and they never have an answer to that question because it's not going to be China. You don't want them to do it because it's going to be a disaster. Russia, you don't want them to do it because theirs is going to be entirely, you know, self-involved and they're going to do horrible things. So the real answer is it has to be us, even if you don't want it to be us. And so I think that my judgment of this war is going to come down to, are we sending boots on the ground? Is this going to be a war this time next year? If so, I would say it's a failure. If we're out of this thing in 12 to 16 weeks and we truly have a less extreme government there, then I think it's a massive success.
Dante, I'll say, I want to know what you think of what Robbie said, but I'll tip my hand and say, not only do I think that's very, very sensible, I think it also reflects probably a higher percentage of American point of view than most. But how do you feel about what Robbie said?
I agree with the majority of that. I believe that there has to be somebody kind of leading the way, right? The world needs a leader. And we have positioned ourselves as such, not only economically, but, you know, morally, we're supposed to be that compass where we say we are in favor of providing people with opportunity, certain freedoms, like the freedom of speech and things like that, which the Iranians didn't have. They were being killed if they protest. And I don't think that that's fair and right, and somebody should stand up for them. But my thing, and I say this consistently, there has to be a plan. I don't know what we're doing there. It can't just be to bomb them, because to what end? And it's really what we want to happen as a result of this war isn't clear. And that puts us in a position where we don't know if we're winning, losing, how long it's going to last, if we should celebrate this at the end or not, because I just don't think the objectives of the war have been made clear. If we can do that, if we can say this is what we want from this, a different regime, if it's regime change, say that. But yes, I agree with Robbie, then prop up a regime that can take over, that we know are going to treat the Iranians better and give them an opportunity to succeed. You can't go in, kill the leader, bomb facilities or places and then just leave, because it's going to be a disaster. And we've experienced that before, where the country is now worse off than it's ever been because they are without a leader at all. So it's chaos. So what's the objective and what are we doing to get to that end, I think is the important question. If that can be explained to the citizens of the United States and the people all over the world, I think it will be much easier for both us and them to get behind it. It will be easier for our allies to show up and support us with opening up the Strait of Hormuz and all of that, if they knew exactly what the plan was, what our objective was, what their role would be, what the exposure would be, what potential lives would be lost. That has to be explained and clarified. I just don't think it has been yet.
Again, you speak for tens of millions as well. Let me run through some Iran headlines. And again, we could spend the hour on this, but there are other topics I want to get to. We heard from a number of administration officials today, including the president. I just played some from him. Steve Witkoff, speaking at the same conference in Miami that Jared Kushner spoke at yesterday, and the president speaking to in moments, just said that he expects there will be U.S.-Iranian negotiations face-to-face, or at least in the same city this week.
We've got a bite ready if you want to play it now.
Let's play that, please.
It's good. Yeah.
We have a very powerful military. It's unlikely we're going to lose any conflict with Iran. On the other hand, we also have a president who believes in elegant solutions. And elegant solutions are diplomatic solutions. We have a 15-point deal on the table that the Iranians have had for a bit of time. We expect an answer from them, and it would solve it all. It would solve the enrichment question, which is we can't have enrichment there today. It would solve the material question. They have close to 10,000 kilograms of enriched material stockpiled, which they have to give up. It would solve the stockpiling question and the oversight question. So all of these are red lines for us. But we're not looking to see the dissolution of the Iranian people. We think they're very good people. We want them to thrive and survive, and the country to join the League of Nations and to be prosperous and do a lot of business. We just don't want the destabilizing forces that they've generated out there. We don't want to encourage and advocate for non-state terror actors or for militias. I think if all of those things happen, then we'll have a better world. And by the way, we may end up with all kinds of collateral benefits.
Okay, that's Steve Witkoff. Here's Marco Rubio here in France with meeting G7 foreign ministers talking about Iran. Go ahead and play 5 and 6 back to back, please.
System's going to talk to you about what we have planned or what we intend to do, and there's obvious reasons for it. But to the extent it has to do with like military tactics and plans, I would refer you to the Department of War, and the Department of War is probably going to tell you they can't tell you anything. So other than to say that we have objectives, I told you what those objectives are, and we are very confident that we are on the verge of achieving them very, very soon.
All right, so Iran says that Israel hit a heavy water production plant today that has some radiation risk involved, as well as a steel production factory where radiation is also a factor. And the Iranian foreign minister tweeted this earlier today, number 7, accusing Israel of bombing in defiance of the president's deadline. Israel has hit 2 of Iran's largest steel factories, a power plant, and its civilian nuclear sites, among other infrastructure. Israel claims it acted in coordination with the U.S. Attack contradicts President of the United States' extended deadline for diplomacy. Iran will exact heavy price for Israeli crimes. This could be part of why the markets did not like today. Number 4, please. Dow went down quite a bit, and you talk to anybody in the business, and they'll say they're concerned. There's a CNBC headline: Dow tumbles almost 800 points and enters correction. The S&P 500 posts 5th straight losing week. Lastly, let's Polymarket this from our partners at Polymarket, number 8. Will there be a ceasefire by April 30th? That's about a month away, a little bit over a month. This is number 8, please. 40% chance of a ceasefire. Not sure what I think about that number, but let's start there. Robbie, 40% chance of a ceasefire with a month and a few days? Where would you be on that question?
I don't think it is ever a wise thing to try to predict the way a terrorist regime is going to behave. Like the thing is, if you're faced with, options that to you as a wounded animal feel like a no-win, you sometimes do crazy things. And so it's hard to predict when and how it will end. I tend to think that the only way you sort of actually restart from here is you do actually have to kill everybody in leadership. And I think it's terrible, war sucks and everything, but if you actually want to do the job, I think you have to take them all out one by one or as quickly as you can. And you need to actually replace them with people who understand the lines here that, yes, you will be able to have your own country. You will be able to run it. You will be able to have democratic elections and everything. But if you cross these lines, this is what's going to happen to you. And I think it serves as a greater, broader warning to other countries that want to, sort of install tyrants and do crazy things that we are watching, and there will be consequences. And I do think, back to the point Dante was making about, you have to have, sort of set objectives. The administration does have objectives. I think the problem is the messaging of those objectives is very difficult when Israel is sort of like running a parallel set of objectives. And I'm not, don't get me wrong, I'm not anti-Israel. I think that they have every right to defend themselves and everything, but I do think that it muddies the messaging of what the actual objectives are when, 1 minute you have Trump saying one thing and then Israel does another. And so I do think that's something that could become untenable, and there has to be a conversation about that and, not be at cross objectives. But in general, I do think it's sort of the same deal as Venezuela and Cuba. You've got to take out the top dogs.
I will push back that just a bit in the sense that this isn't, say, Venezuela with Nicolas Maduro, where you take him out or you go and remove him, and then his successor steps up and you say, listen, do what we say or you're going to be removed as well, right? That was pretty easy transition. It's not built that way in Iran. You have a religious power structure, a military power structure. There's it's so spread out the power and who has a say. If we're trying to just kill everybody in power, then yes, that prediction of whether this war will be over by the end of April 30th, that's not going to happen because it's going to take forever. The way that they're structured out and the way that they spread out their power system, it's impossible to do that. And that's what I don't know if we truly anticipated the right way when we went in there. You can't just take out the Ayatollah and then one person steps up and says, okay, I'm going to run this nation the way you want me to do it. That's not how Iran is set up. So I don't know if that's a realistic expectation here. It's an ideology that's built into that nation that we have to show there's a better way. We have to either arm the people, which they've tried to do in different ways, and have them come in and maybe take over and move out that establishment slowly but surely. But it's more complicated than saying, let's just kill everybody in power, because it's not one fine list. It's different sects of groups that has the influence to continue running their nation the way it was running. I do agree you have to make sure they have no ability to have nuclear weapons. I think last year we were told that was obliterated. I think that just the enrichment levels that they were at now, we're nowhere close to a nuclear weapon. But if we want to make sure that that's the case, I agree with that wholeheartedly. But we need, again, some kind of plan if we want to put in some regime that we know is going to treat the people fairly and give the Iranian people a chance to really have success.
Well, I think, you've got to sort of explain to me what is the benefit of the United States explaining to the Iranians exactly what our objectives are and exactly how we plan for things to go. I think that's it's kind of handing over a little bit too much information to your enemy. I think the broad, sort of explanation that's out there, I think makes sense. If you look at
what is it? What's the broad explanation?
They've said they want regime change. I mean, that's been out in the open.
No, they said they didn't. They said they didn't go and want to.
No, they said they do want it.
Change.
They have said that. They've said that out in the open that they want regime change.
I mean, I've heard, you've heard different, but regime, then what have we done to make that happen? We can point to, I guess, President Trump's.
They did kill the Ayatollah.
Well, we can point to President Trump's message, I guess, when he said, we've taken out your leader, so now people rise up. But then they were told, the next day to stay in the house until this is over. So I don't know. How do we get to that end if that's our true end?
We're not read in on everything that's going on. For all we know, the reason the secondary thing was sent is because they became aware of a threat that would have hurt many, many innocent people. And so they said, hey, we're going to pull back on this and more needs to be done before we get to that point. What I would say, though, is when I say we need to kill everybody in leadership, I'm not talking about everybody throughout the entire government. I'm talking about every leader of a specific node of power within that government, which is a much smaller list. And part of it has been completed, but I think there's still, I'd argue probably about 40 to 60 other key individuals that probably need to be taken out for there to be the amount of destabilization necessary to be able to, rise people up that are willing to sort of flip sides given the right temperature in the country. And when we talk about the way the country works, again, it's not so much the ideology of the country that's the problem. It's the ideology of the regime. Because the country itself, outside of the villages and everything, because the villages tend to be much more on the side of the Ayatollah, but in the major city centers, it's a very different ideology. They have been opposed to the regime for quite a while. They're just afraid of being murdered. It's sort of the same thing as Cuba, in that respect. Is the island has been against the Communist Party for a long time, but there's not much you can do when the ballot doesn't allow any other candidates, right? Yeah. So I think that's the reality of the situation.
All right, here's, guys, we could talk about it around for the hour. Here's what we're going to do, because I want to get a chance to get the community in before too long. So let me run through some stuff, and you guys, I'll ask you to briefly comment on some of it, and some of it I'll just bring people up to date, and then we'll get to your questions again. If you're here on the platform, would like to be in on the conversation with Dante and Robbie, please raise your hand. Here are pictures of Tiger Woods' Range Rover on its side in Jupiter, Florida. The police believe, you can just flash those up for those watching on the video version, those listening on the podcast. I'll just tell you, there's a Range Rover on its side, just the one picture. All right, so there it is. He is not injured seriously, and neither is the other driver. And the police believe that this is a case involving pills rather than alcohol. We'll continue to monitor that. Now, some other things to tell you. The The TSA situation is a mess. Basically, this morning after the Senate passed a bill at 3 a.m., we thought the House would pass it with bipartisan support, but the Speaker decided to not do that, and he's got another solution, which doesn't match the Senate solution. However, the President has stepped in to order the TSA agents be paid. I'm not exactly sure how he's going to do that, but he signed an executive order today. So presumably the TSA agents will go back. I could tell you a million things that J.D. Vance said today, both at a public event and in an interview, but let's hold off on that for a moment. Robbie mentioned Cuba, and as you mentioned at the beginning, he's got family roots there. And this is a fascinating story that Secretary Rubio continues to work on. And my expectation is that the Cuban regime will change and be friendly to the United States by the end of the year. Here is Secretary Rubio, again, overseas here in France. Number 9, please, talking about Cuba. Number 9, please.
There seems to be a sense that perhaps President Trump would be happy with a win, which would only entail an economic deal.
So you said there's a sense. Where do you get that sense from?
Well, there's a lot of reporting that
there's a lot of fake. All right, any reporting on Cuba that you didn't get from me or the president is a liar, because they're the only people working on it.
Do you still want regime change?
I'm just warning you guys. All these sources that are pitching you on Cuba don't know jack. Okay, they're not in the mix. Okay. I promise you, they don't know what the hell's happening.
Regime change, or would you be okay with an economic deal?
What do you mean an economic deal? Look, Cuba's economy needs to change, and their economy can't change unless their system of government changes. It's that simple. Who's going to invest billions of dollars in a communist country? Who's going to invest billions of dollars in a communist country run by incompetent communists, which is even worse than communists? The only thing worse than a communist is an incompetent communist. And so their system of government has to change, because they will never be able to develop economically without those changes. Economic change is important. Giving people economic and political freedom is important, but they come hand in hand. They come together.
Well, you can see how invested he is in this emotionally and intellectually. And the thing he said there is extraordinary. He said, only the president and I are working on this. It's kind of an incredible thing to say. And he is working very hard on it. Here's a polymarket on this question. Will the U.S. invade Cuba this year? Number 10. Will there be a U.S. invasion of Cuba? Polymarket wagers think there's a 24% chance that there'll be an invasion. My strong view is this is going to end not with an invasion, but just with a very tough economic screws being put to Havana, and the Cuban government is saying no mas and ending the dictatorship. Robbie, you first, because your home field advantage on this. What's your sense of where this is headed?
I mean, I don't think people can appropriately fathom the level of hate that Marco and I have for these people. If people understood the things that were done to people we love, to our family, to their friends. I mean, I have family members murdered by this regime. I am willing to do anything and everything to eliminate them, and I think Marco is too. In fact, I haven't said this to anybody. I had a conversation with Pete Hegseth where I told him, Pete, I straight up, dead serious, I volunteer if there is a mission to Cuba. You send me wherever you need to send me, and I will go with the guys. Like it's deep seated, you know. So where this is going is very clear. The regime, I think, is going to be toppled well before the end of the year. I would say it'll be by the end of summer, and I think
toppled by whom?
By the United States.
But yes. through a military invasion?
If it's necessary, yes. You know, if they don't play ball and do exactly as they're told to, yes, because it'd be remarkably quick. Cuba doesn't have the military power, structure, or willingness. You have to remember, a large portion of their military is there in compelled service, and they want to be a part of the United States. These are people who are viscerally opposed to the communist government that are forced into it. Like, I have a family member who is a doctor that was forced to work for almost nothing every day, like $1 a day, right? These people are compelled and forced into everything they do. I have a family member that was murdered because they went fishing beyond what they were rationed to be allowed to eat for their family, okay? These are not good people. These are very evil people. And so I think if they are not smart and they don't take the deal, they will be invaded, and I think they'll be taken out very quickly. And I don't think you'll have to do anything far beyond what we did in Venezuela to make that happen.
Dante,
I don't even know if you're going to have to go that far. Just Cuba doesn't have the economic structure to support fighting back. Cuba just can't support itself economically. They were propped up by Russia and China, and that squeeze is on now. We're blocking that. We're blocking their energy sources from bringing in energy to the country, and that's really putting them in a tight spot where they're not going to have a choice but to say yes to whatever we tell them to say yes to. I've been to Cuba. I've seen firsthand how dangerous but safe it is at the same time because of that fear. You know, when I went there, I was concerned about my safety, and I was told, listen, you have nothing to worry about because they know everything that's happening here. They control everything that's happening here. They're not going to let anything happen to someone from the United States, but they know everybody's under constant watch. It's not it's not a friendly place to be for the people that are from there. They're not happy. I've seen, if we remember, Obama opened up Cuba. He took a trip there. They didn't have the money to really welcome him in. What they did is the path that he took from the airport to where he was going, they painted using regular paint that strip, just the front of those buildings. So when people saw pictures, they didn't realize how bad of a shape Cuba was in. They're really in a struggle right now economically. They have the best doctors in the world. They have great people there, but they just can't support themselves economically. I think they need the United States. I think it would be a good partnership for us as well. And I think it's going to happen sooner than later.
Robbie, have you or your family been back?
Yeah, so I mean, the deal with most Cuban families that are here in America is that you have one designated family member that goes back to bring supplies, right? And it's been like that for a long time for most Cuban families, because you have to remember, like, our families there, they don't have things like Tylenol, they don't have things like tampons, like normal things that people need, you know, in life. And so there's one person designated in each family that does that. I don't even talk to my family members that are in Cuba for their own safety because of politics. And so, and I would expect, that is the case for a lot of people who are involved in politics that oppose the Cuban government just out of concern for their family there. But, I would say the funniest thing I saw recently is the Cuban government, they thought their way out of this is they said, well, we're going to allow Cubans in America to invest in property here and invest in businesses here now. And I was like, so you're going to allow us the honor of buying back the stuff you stole from us? It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And I don't know what kind of idiot would go, this thief stole from me, and they're asking for money for me to buy my wallet back from them. I don't know what idiot would sign up for that. But I mean, none of the Cubans here are that dumb. So they're going to have a tough sell there. But, I'm very hopeful about the change and hopeful that it will lead to something intelligent. And I will say this. I like to make sure I'm always intellectually, very consistent with my views on different countries and everything. And so I always come from an America First orthodoxy in how I think about war and anything like this, right? And our first thought has to be, how does this benefit the United States? And the reality is we're talking about a barrier island that is decent size. It's 90 miles off our coast that in the past was used as a point of threatening the United States mainland. So when we're thinking about potential future ground wars, World War III stuff that we hope never happens, but pretend it does, one of the most important things we could have is barriers to entry and also barriers in front of the mainland where we can deploy defensive capabilities. So that is the usefulness of both Greenland and Cuba and a number of other, small places.
Venezuela, that's the reason we went in there.
Yeah,
regional security.
These can be, places that are essentially managed under our close watch, or they can be territories, or in the case of Cuba, maybe even, something else. I think that in general, though, we have to have enough control that we've got bases that we can operate forward from and that we can defend the mainland from.
Amazing. All right. I'd love to talk more about Cuba. Let me do some real quick things. We're going to go to your questions as soon as I run through some things. The president has begun his address in Miami to this investment conference. He started out by saying, for 47 years, Iran has been known as the bully of the Middle East, but they're not the bully any longer. They're on the run. And then he said this.
Tonight, we're closer than ever to the rise of the Middle East that is finally free at last from Iranian terror, aggression, and nuclear blackmail. That's what's happened.
Okay. Quick word from a sponsor, then right to your questions. We'll keep monitoring the president. There's potentially some other news as well we'll get to, but stand by and please raise your hand if you want to be on the conversation. If you want to save some money, I'll give you a tip. The free Upside app gives away $1 million a week to people for nothing. There's no charge for the app or using the service. All you need to do is shop. Do you go to restaurants, gas stations, supermarkets? Most people do. The free Upside apps gives you cash back. You use your credit card like you normally would. All the benefits you get with your credit card in terms of cash back or other benefits you still get. But if you use the Upside app at over 100,000 participating locations around the United States, you get cash back. Not points, not credits that expire, just money you transfer right to your bank account. And right now you can get an extra 25 cents off every gallon of your first fill up if you use the Upside app. So take out your phone, just download it. You'll see how easy it is to use. It shows you all the locations in the area that take it. $1 million a week, over $1 billion given back to people in the United States for using the Upside app. Download it right now and use the promo code two-way to get an additional 25 cents a gallon on your first fill up. John Green, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are and what's on your mind for Robbie and for Dante, and thank you for being a part of Two Way.
Hey, Mark, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. Hear you fine.
Outstanding. I'm currently on Little Talbot Island, a little south of Amelia Island in Northeast Florida, just enjoying the afternoon. I want to talk a little bit about some aspects of Iran. We hear a lot about the political aspects, the economic aspects, how the war is going. But I want to talk about first boots on the ground. I had the privilege of serving briefly in the military, and when we join, we commit to the fact that we may be committed in some manner to be on the ground. And yeah, it's great to be able to do strategic strikes that accomplish the mission, but that's what Marines do. That's what MEUs do, is they do task organized missions on a limited basis to secure railheads or airfields and then leave or pass them on to other aspects of the military. The second thing I wanted to talk about are the broader strategic implications of Iran vis-a-vis our real foe or antagonist, which is China. And if China were to move on Taiwan, it would not be hard for Iran with, say, some hypersonic anti-ship missiles to open a second front on our rear while we're trying to deal with Iran. And then the Strait of Hormuz becomes very strategically important. And then the third point I want to make is doctrinally. The nature of warfare is evolving right now. We see in Ukraine how important drones are. We can see how Iran is using them very effectively to accomplish some of their goals. And you can train all you want, but you know, it's a little pragmatic and a little dark. But when you fight in a new way using drones and other new technologies, I mean, empires are littered with militaries who have not adapted to new military technology. And so all those aspects are not really thought of very much in the mainstream media or even the alternative media. I just
John,
want to
thank you
get
for
your
that. Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that, John. And Secretary Rubio said today he didn't believe that the mission required putting American boots on the ground. Robbie, pick up on whichever of those you wish. The question of the use of drones, boots on the ground, or the specter of China hovering.
Well, first I have to say, Mark, you have some very intelligent listeners, because that was everything you talked about. You're very astute. You definitely know 1,000% what you're talking about, and I think a lot of those items are not talked about enough. I think one of the things that I'd key in on, though, is like the idea of targeted strikes. I think it's become colloquially used to describe not just actual targeted strikes, but also, you know, special forces missions, things that are limited in nature, right? I think that the thing a lot of people like myself are more concerned about is us dropping, you know, 15,000 people on the ground there and saying, hey, we're going to be here in a quagmire for 5-10 years, right? And I don't think the president wants that. I don't think the administration wants that. I think that there are, unfortunately, some elements of the, you know, swamp apparatus that would like to see that. So my hope is we can stick to something that is more targeted and intelligent in how we carry it out. I think that's what Marco wants. I think that's what the president wants. The question is, is it all achievable in the time frame that they would like to do this in? I hope so. And I believe at this point with the track record, don't have to look further than recently with Maduro, that they should be given a little bit of leeway to do this and hold some things close to the vest to ensure operational integrity. So I do think that you bring up some good points. I think the adaptiveness to drone warfare is going to become increasingly important over time. And there's some promising technology. And I think that we have invested money in interesting companies that are going to be very beneficial to the United States in that respect.
Dante,
they're talking about that. Yeah, they're talking about that often, just the changing face of war, the evolution of war with modern technology. And you talk about how fast it progresses. When you look at Russia and Ukraine, they say with those drone strikes that Russia was sending in, they had to, every 2 weeks, you had to change how you were both sending drones and they were changing how they were defending. It was moving that quickly that you had to make adjustments bi-weekly with the way you attack and the way you defend. So that is something that you have to be mindful of, that this isn't anymore where kind of both teams have their soldiers face off on the field and whoever has the most men or the biggest power wins. That's not it. A lot of stuff now is happening behind the scenes using technology. You don't have to be present. I hope we don't get to a point or even the thought of putting 15,000 troops on the ground because we have to remember there's 19 million people in Iran. A lot of them are going to be coming after our soldiers. And we don't want them isolated to that degree because they're going to be outmanned. We don't have those kind of partners in the region that we can rely on to have our backs and protect our six, right, when they're out there fighting on the front line. So yes, targeted missions would absolutely be better. And that includes, Robbie is absolutely right, more than just certain strikes. It includes sending in a Delta force or a force that's limited in manpower with a certain objective to take someone out or take over a specific target and then turn that over to somebody else so that we're not left there with our troops kind of manning the fort. That's happened before in the Middle East and we lost a lot of lives. We don't want that to happen again. So yes,
John,
we have to adjust.
John, thank you, John. Grateful to you for coming on. I just want to get somebody else in, but grateful to you. 3 great questions, 3 great topics. Dave, welcome in. David, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are and what's on your mind for Robbie.
Yeah, my name is David March. I live in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. So actually, Mark, you're always talking about the community and the other groups here. I got together with 2 of the other community members and we did a podcast covering what we thought was going on with the Iran war with Richard Swank and Kelly Jordan. So that was kind of fun. Awesome. And if anyone wants to watch it, follow the Spy Guy on YouTube. But for me, I'm actually concerned about another story that's not getting a lot of talk about how all the refineries in California are probably going to shut down in a year. And where you're going, you're not going, and this is very devastating to like all the air bases and military bases on the West Coast. And also the fact that, I'm in the logistics for business for 25 years. All your food comes on trucks. And if you don't have diesel for those trucks, you're going to run out of food.
Is this due to an environmental rule?
Yeah, this is all about like Clean Air Authority and other people there. And I think the federal government needs to hear about this more because if those plants close, you're in big trouble.
I mean, that reminds me of, what we've seen across Europe where all of these, so-called progressive politicians were sold on the idea of eliminating nuclear energy. And then what did they do? They pitted themselves in a position where they had to pretend they opposed Russia while buying Russian oil, because they didn't have enough energy to be able to heat during the winters, and it goes further than that. I mean, it's caused energy catastrophe for them. So, California never surprises me in their sort of willingness to shoot themselves in the foot with these types of crazy rules.
I think, David, you can rest assured that we're okay here. We produce more oil than anyone in the world. I also believe in supplementing that and finding alternatives, but as a supplement, not a replacement. I think there was this push, especially in Europe, to replace oil and things like that with wind, and you just can't do that. You can't replace it. You use it as a supplement. So I want us to continue pushing in that direction, but not forget about what really keeps this earth moving, which is that, that oil supply, that source. But we're well taken care of here in our country. We're upping our production even as we speak, and we're making sure that we don't have to rely on any other country or any other nation to have heat and energy and be able to move about. We'll
David,
be
I
good
know
here.
I know California has a bunch of wacky rules, but I'm not familiar with what you're talking about. But I will take a look, and thank you for being part of Two-Way. Reynolds, welcome in. Thank you for being here. Tell folks who don't know where you are and what's on your mind for Dante and for Robbie.
Yeah, I'm from Georgia, and you can look it up. Valero just is paying $1 billion to shut down an oil refinery in California because of the regulations. It's like it's not worth it anymore. So yeah, California is really destroying themselves, and now I think Governor Newsom is begging for them to stay, but a lot of these oil refineries are like, you made it too hard, so they're all leaving. So yeah, so California's got problems. But I'd like to go back to Iran real quick. Everyone just assumes that Trump says, 4 weeks from now, I'm going to quit bombing. Well, great. You quit bombing, you walk away. Well, what would he do? And I don't think any reporters asked this question. I wish someone would. If you quit bombing, say I declare victory, and then Iran keeps bombing the Gulf states and Israel, would you walk away? And the answer is no. Well, then the war can't be solved without total capitulation from Iran. And that's going to require some boots on the ground. It's going to require special forces, to go in. And you don't take over the whole country. But if you go back to the Gulf War I in '91, and when we invaded Kuwait, you had two types of soldiers in Iraqi. You had the Iraqi Guard, which were very loyal to Saddam Hussein, and you had the regular military. And the Guard would shoot the regular military if they were going to surrender. So that kept them boots on the ground for their side. So I don't know how many soldiers are in the RICG or whatever it's called. But that's really what you had to take out.
Yeah.
And so you can't bomb them out of power. So at some point, using partly cards, but you're going to have to use special ops. Like, there's no way, because if I'm Iran, I'm looking at oil prices. I look at by the way, I'll give you Mark, quit looking at the oil prices every morning. You got to look at the 10-year Treasury yield. If 10-year Treasury yield hits 5% before the elections, the Republicans are going to lose any race that's plus or minus 10%. So you look at the 10-year Treasury yield. It started before the war at 3.9, and it's up over 4.4. It hits 4.5, it's going to be bad. 5%, some real shit to go down. But I would think to that extent, at some point, we've got to have boots on the ground. Like, we're kidding ourselves that Trump can just walk away. And I don't know why people keep on saying that. Why doesn't a reporter ask the tough question? If you walk away and Iran keeps bombing, are you going to stick around, or are we going to wash our hands out of that? And the price of oil still doesn't go down if that happens.
Yeah.
So do you have any idea what would happen?
Yeah, I'll say three quick things and then let Robbie and Dante respond briefly because we're up against the clock. First of all, everybody in finance tells me every day I should just be looking at the 10-year, and I do, because I know too. Number two, the president's not going to walk away, I believe strongly, if Iran has capability. I just don't think it's going to happen. And the last thing I'll say is, I know historically you would need boots on the ground to have regime change, but we've never had this many senior officials killed. We've never had a government with facing an uprising the way they faced. We've never had drones the way we have. So I'm not sure history is necessarily going to be the guide here on whether this can happen. And the president might put 10,000 or maybe even tens of thousands on the ground, but it will be for a limited mission. He will not put 200,000 troops on the ground. And without 200,000 people on the ground, you're not going to do anything to effectuate change. They'd be for a limited mission of opening the strait or taking the nuclear material. They're not going to be a ground war in Iran. There's just not. Robbie.
I would tend to agree with everything you just said. I think that in general, like we said earlier with the other question, people use the term targeted strike, I think, to describe more than just missiles. It's really sort of a common way to be able to say we don't want 100,000 of our troops on the ground for 10 years. People are willing to accept, the idea of sending in special forces and carrying out select targeted missions. I think that makes sense. That's basically it. I think it's It's fairly simple in that respect. That's what people are willing to accept.
We're the biggest, the best, and the strongest, but we have to acknowledge that it's not a one-sided war. Iran is going to do whatever they can to stay alive, right? That these leaders know that if they hand their country over to someone else, they're going to be killed. So they're going to do whatever they can to stay alive, which includes bombing their neighbors, because they figure if we're all suffering, then then we're still in the game. So I think Reynolds has a point that they may not, even if we walk away, they may not be done with how they're treating their neighbors because they don't want their neighbors to surpass them in oil production or anything else. So that's going to be a concern, how they treat their neighbors even after we leave.
I will jump in there just to say it ignores a little bit of reality, which is the fact that if they were to behave like that, once we make some kind of deal and they go do that, they know the consequences will be exceedingly dire, because not only does it, make Trump look like a fool, but it is insulting to the rest of the administration too. And I think that the stomach they will have for any more games is going to be fairly limited. And I think at that point, see, this is the thing people have to remember too, because people say you should be so worried about Iran doing this or that or this, that, or the other thing. The thing is, Iran does have some, handcuffs on in some respect, because if you do something right now and it is too egregious, the United States will open up options that we have not opened in a very long time, and it will be a much different ball game. And I don't think that they want that, and I don't think we want that, but they do know that if they cross certain lines, things will get much uglier than they are.
If they're bombing their neighbors while we're there, they'll probably bomb them when we're not there. We just have to be mindful of that.
Yeah, well said by both of you. Reynolds, all your questions and points were great. I should have made that clear. I don't agree with necessarily all of them, but they're all very strong. Grateful to Robbie and to Dante. Thank you both for coming on. Hope you'll come back. And Robbie, when you go to Cuba, I'm going to embed with you for the opening scene of the profile I'm going to write. So save a seat.
I really did tell Pete that. I don't think he's gonna pull me up, but I told him I've been practicing. I've got a range on my farm.
I've been practicing.
I appreciate that. Just save a seat for me and Coach, because I'm going to go with you. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here again. Hope you'll come back. Thank you all for being part of Two-Way. Barring breaking news over the weekend or a special report, we'll see you Monday morning, 9 a.m. for the morning meeting and this program as well. And grateful to everybody for what has been an eventful week with a lot of great community participation. Thank you both. Thank you all. And have a great weekend, and I'll see you on Monday.